Good evening, dear listeners. Tonight, I invite you into a story about a woman the world had trained not to see, and a man who learned too late what it meant to truly look. London, June 1818. The library of Lindsay House lay in shadow, lit only by the soft, trembling glow of a single candelabra. Leather-bound volumes rose like silent sentinels to the ceiling. The air carried the comforting scent of beeswax, old paper, and a trace of tobacco that no amount of airing ever fully removed. It was well past midnight, and while the grand household slept, one restless soul stood among the shelves, seeking refuge in a place that had never judged her. Miss Imogene Fairchild stood in her night dress and wrapper, dark chestnut hair escaping its pins, framing a face that was more striking than beautiful. At 24, she had long since accepted what society had decided she was. Too old for a proper debut, too plain to inspire poetry, too useful to be spared. After her mother's death, Imogene had raised her younger siblings, managed her father's accounts, balanced household ledgers, soothed fevers, negotiated suppliers, and buried any foolish dreams beneath neat columns of responsibility. Now she was in London not for herself, but for her sister. Beautiful Cecilia. Cecilia, whose laughter filled rooms. Cecilia, whose presence softened men's voices. Cecilia, whose season was being sponsored by the powerful Dowager Countess of Lindsay. Imogene was here to chaperone, to organize, to protect, to fade into the background exactly as she always had. Overlooked. She was tracing the spine of a book when the library door opened. And everything changed. Lord Damien Harcourt, Earl of Lindsay, stood in the doorway with an unopened bottle of brandy in his hand and devastation written plainly across a face society called handsome. His dark hair had fallen loose across his brow. His cravat was undone. His coat gone. His gray-green eyes carried the exhaustion of a man who had been holding himself together too long. He saw her. Really saw her. Surprise crossed his face. Then something almost like embarrassment. "You are the merchant's daughter," he said roughly. "The other one. Not the pretty one." The words landed like a slap. Heat rushed to Imogene's cheeks, that familiar sting of being measured and dismissed in the same breath. But something in his tone, uncertain, searching, made her straighten instead of shrink. "And you," she replied calmly, heart-pounding, "are the supposedly reformed earl who appears to have abandoned that ambition tonight. Tell me, my lord, are you the rake this evening, or the penitent?" For a moment he simply stared. Then, to her complete astonishment, he laughed. Not the polite sound of ballrooms, but a startled real laugh, rough around the edges. "Neither," he said, setting the bottle aside. "Tonight I am simply a man who is drowning, and who has unexpectedly found someone who speaks honestly instead of offering empty comforts." He moved farther into the room, candlelight revealing the strain beneath his composure. "Drowning in what?" Imogene asked quietly. Before he could answer, her eyes caught the open ledger on his desk. She stepped closer. "You have miscalculated this column," she said, pointing. "You have compounded the quarterly loss twice. The situation is serious, but not as catastrophic as this suggests." Damien froze, checked the figures, then looked at her as though she had shifted the ground beneath his feet. He opened a leather folder and handed it to her. "Debt," he said simply. £40,000. Imogene inhaled slowly. This was not scandal. This was disaster. And for the first time in her life, the world's most powerful man was looking at her, not past her. She met his eyes. "Then stop drowning alone," she said, "and let me help you swim." And in the quiet heart of a midnight library, a practical, invisible woman stepped into a story that would change everything. The following afternoon, Imogene returned to the library with a stack of fresh paper, her father's account ledger tucked beneath her arm, and a determination she had not felt in years. Damien was already there. He stood by the desk, sleeves rolled, hair still damp as if he had bathed but not fully rested. The untouched brandy bottle from the night before had been removed. In its place lay scattered correspondence, debt notices, and estate accounts. For the first time since his father's death, the chaos of his situation had been laid bare to another human being. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I would," Imogene replied, setting her materials down. "And I do not offer empty words." They began. Not as lord and merchant's daughter, not as man and woman, but as strategists. They categorized debts, identified interest traps, marked assets for sale, highlighted creditors who could be negotiated with and those who could not. Imogen's mind moved with precision, seeing patterns where Damien had seen only drowning water. "You've been reacting," she explained, charcoal scratching quickly across paper. "Selling without sequence. Appeasing the loudest creditors instead of the most dangerous ones. You need a structure. A long game." And Damien, who had commanded regiments of servants and hosts of guests, listened. He asked questions. He learned. He watched the invisible woman take command of his disaster and turn it into something shaped, something survivable. They met every afternoon after that. The Dowager Countess believed they were addressing correspondence. The servants were instructed not to interrupt. And behind closed doors, two isolated people built an alliance that grew steadily more dangerous with every shared hour. They argued, fiercely at times, over which properties must go first, over whether pride could afford to survive, over whether reputation mattered when solvency did not. "You were raised to preserve appearances," Imogen said one afternoon. "I was raised to preserve survival. Those are not the same." "And yet," Damien countered, watching her thoughtfully, "you manage both better than anyone I know." Sometimes they worked in silence. Sometimes they laughed. Once, when Damien knocked over an inkwell in frustration, black ink flooding carefully ordered pages, Imogen startled him by laughing, a bright, unrestrained sound that echoed between the shelves. He stared at her, then laughed too, a slow, surprised laugh, as though he had forgotten how. It was in the small moments that things shifted. The tea he brought her without asking. The way he paused before speaking, considering her thoughts first. The way he watched her when she was absorbed in numbers, as if seeing something remarkable rather than merely useful. One evening, he found her exhausted in the drawing room after a ball, shoes discarded, shoulders slumped. Without comment, he brought her tea, sat beside her, said nothing. "Who looks after you?" he asked eventually. Imogen blinked. "I look after myself." "Capable," he said gently. "But capable is not the same as cared for." The words lodged in her chest. She had no defense against them. She told herself it was foolishness, fatigue, proximity, gratitude mistaken for affection. Because reality remained. Damien Harcourt needed an heiress. Aristocratic gold. A woman whose dowry could erase £40,000 and silence society in one stroke. Imogen Fairchild was the wrong kind of rich. Trade wealth. New money. Merchant blood. Useful. But unsuitable. She knew it. And so did he. Yet when she stood at the edges of ballrooms watching Cecilia dance, she felt Damien's gaze find her across crowded rooms. And for the first time in her life, someone saw her. Not as a shadow. Not as a function. But as something dangerously close to extraordinary. The garden party at Lindsay House was meant to be a triumph of the season. Musicians played beneath silk canopies. Guests drifted through rose-lined paths. Laughter floated over fountains and candlelight. Imogen, as always, kept to the edges. She watched Cecilia charm a circle of admirers, redirected eager suitors, smiled politely, blended into walls, until a footman approached with quiet urgency. "Miss Fairchild, your sister requests you near the eastern path." Concern stirred immediately. Imogen followed the direction through narrowing hedges and thinning crowds, until she reached a secluded bench hidden beneath climbing roses. And there she saw it. Edmund Fairfax, rake predator, Damien's former companion, had Cecilia pressed back, his hands where they did not belong. Cecilia's face was pale, her struggle restrained by shock. Imogen did not think. She moved. "Remove your hands from my sister," she commanded, her voice slicing through the hush like steel. "Step away. Now. Or I will scream loudly enough to summon every guest in this garden." Fairfax released Cecilia, irritation flashing before a lazy smirk replaced it. "Such drama, Miss Fairchild. A misunderstanding." Imogen placed herself between him and her sister. "You attempted to compromise her. You know exactly what you intended." "And what will you do?" he murmured, stepping closer. "I am a gentleman. You are a merchant's daughter pretending at gentility. Whose word do you imagine society will believe? The truth struck cold. She could threaten, but he could destroy. Before she could answer, a new voice cut through the leaves. I believe the lady asked you to step away. Damien emerged from the path. His expression was controlled. His eyes were lethal. Fairfax paled. Damien spoke quietly. Precisely. You will leave this gathering. You will leave London by morning. Or I will ensure your creditors descend upon you and your father learns exactly why his son is no longer welcome anywhere I stand. Fairfax fled. But he did not leave without poison. Whispers began before the hour ended. Not about Cecilia. About Imagine. Raised brows. Glances. Fans lifting. By nightfall, the story had shifted. Miss Imagine Fairchild, seen with two gentlemen in secluded paths. Too eager. Too old. Too desperate. Lady Ashbourne's voice carried clearly. Merchant blood grasping. Unsuitable. They always ruin themselves. The words crushed. This was how women were unmade. And there was no defense. Mr. Waverley approached her later, grave and kind. I have heard the rumors. I must withdraw my attentions. I wish you well. But my wife must be beyond question. Security vanished. Respectability evaporated. Only the lie remained. Imagine fled to the library. And Damien followed. They are destroying you, he said fiercely. He won, Imagine replied dully. And he chose the perfect target. My word means everything to me. And mine means nothing to the world. Then Waverley returned. With an offer. A marriage. Not of love. Of containment. A practical rescue for a fallen woman. The choice lay before her. Security or truth. The library felt different that night. Not like a sanctuary. Like a courtroom. Mr. Gerald Waverley stood near the desk, hat in his hands, posture respectful, expression carefully neutral. I am proposing to you, Miss Fairchild, he said evenly. Not because I dismissed the rumors. I do not pretend to know what occurred. But because a swift marriage will soften their impact. You will have security. Protection. Respectability restored. The words were calm. Reasonable. Merciful. And hollow. I offer companionship, he continued. Stability. A sensible life. I believe you will understand the good fortune such an offer represents under present circumstances. Imagine did understand. Too well. He saw her as salvage. Not as someone chosen. May I have a moment, she asked. Waverley bowed and withdrew. Silence returned. Heavy. Damien moved closer. You will refuse him, he said. I don't know, she answered honestly. He offers safety. A way to protect my family. That is not nothing. What about what you want? Damien demanded. What I want has never mattered. It matters to me. The word struck like a blow. I love you, he said. Somewhere between ledgers and laughter, I fell in love with you. Not your usefulness. Not your competence. You. Her breath shook. You need an heiress. I need you. We would be ruined. Then we will rebuild. Before she could answer, the library doors opened. The Dowager Countess entered. And everything changed. I have been watching you both, she said calmly. And I am tired of waiting. She had seen the work. The looks. The change in her son. And she had acted. The garden paths. The witnesses. The scandal. I facilitated circumstances, she said coolly. Because my son was too stubborn to claim the woman he loves. Then she swept them into the ballroom. Where London waited. And rewrote the story. Publicly. Decisively. Fairfax was named a liar. Imagine declared secretly betrothed. Gossip crushed under authority. And then Damien knelt. In full view of the world. And asked the invisible woman to become his wife. The ballroom seemed to vanish. There was only Damien. On one knee. His hand steady. His eyes unguarded. Imagine Fairchild, he said clearly. His voice carrying through the hushed room. You saw me when I was drowning and did not turn away. You took my ruin and found possibility within it. You made me laugh when I believed myself beyond it. You made me want to be honest when I had lived on performance. He opened the small velvet case. Inside lay the Lindsay betrothal ring. I love you. Not for what you can do, not for what you give, but for who you are. Brilliant, strong, unyielding. And if you will take this risk with me, I swear I will spend my life proving that you were never invisible. You were extraordinary. Tears blurred her vision. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times. The ring slid onto her finger. The applause rose like thunder. And when he kissed her, there was nothing restrained about it. No pretense. No performance. Only choice. Underscore 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 underscore. They married 3 weeks later. Not in splendor, but in sincerity. A small ceremony at the country estate chapel. Wildflowers gathered that morning. Her mother's gown altered to fit. His father's coat brushed and worn. When Damien saw her walking toward him, his composure broke. And she knew. Whatever hardship lay ahead, she was chosen. Underscore 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 underscore. The first year was not easy. Properties were sold. Staff reduced. Comfort surrendered. Pride tested. They argued. They learned. They failed and recalculated. They built solvency the same way they built love. Deliberately, honestly, together. Damien entered the House of Lords and fought for financial reforms. Imagine invested wisely. They became known not for splendor, but for integrity. And through it all, they were partners. Not earl and wife, but equals. Underscore 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 underscore. When Imagine discovered she was with child, Damien wept. When twin sons arrived the following spring, he held them as though they were miracles. 2 years later, daughters followed. The nursery filled. The house warmed. And the woman once invisible found herself surrounded by laughter, purpose, and love that did not fade when usefulness ended. Underscore 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 underscore. 8 years later, on the Dowager Countess's 75th birthday, family filled the estate. Children raced through gardens. Cecilia arrived with her own happy brood. Imagine stood on the terrace beside the woman who had once orchestrated a scandal to save them both. He is happy, the Countess said quietly. He saved me too, Imagine replied. He saw me. Later that night, Imagine found Damien in the library, where everything had begun. Do you ever regret it? He asked softly. She silenced him with a kiss. Not one moment. And as moonlight traced silver across the shelves, the practical woman who had believed herself invisible rested in the arms of the man who had chosen her. Not as a solution, not as a sacrifice, but as his love. Some people spend their lives being useful. Some spend them being admired. But the rarest gift is to be truly seen. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember that being chosen for who you are is worth every risk.